After my father passed away, I went to live with my friend and his mom for a little while. Things with my mom were very strained, and I didn't want to stay at my friend's house initially, but they didn't want me alone during that time. Staying at anyone's house always made me feel uneasy for some reason. My first night there, early in the morning, I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door opening, and a gentleman wearing a red flannel and bib denim overalls came into my room holding a bag of tools. He turned the light on, looked at me, and walked through another doorway to the utility room. Soon after, I fell asleep again. But when I woke up this time, the room was dark. Everything was the same when I went to sleep the night previously. Figuring I imagined the whole thing, I went upstairs for coffee and asked my friend's mom if the guy with the overalls is still here. With a weird look, she informed me that it's been her and I in the house all night. At this point, I'm very confused, so I explained detail about what the man looked like: height, weight, clothes, facial hair, everything. She turns pale white and bolts to her room and retrieves a photo. When she shows me the photo, it's the man I saw in the basement that morning, even wearing the same clothes. She tells me that he passed away 30 years ago. It was her grandpa who owned the property previously. He had killed himself to save the farm when he invested his money into horses instead of machines, and his investment flopped. To keep the bank from taking the farm, on a stormy night, he took a lightning rod into the middle of a pond, and nature took his life when lightning struck the rod. Because of this, life insurance paid out, and his suicide saved the family diary and kept the house from being foreclosed on. My dad worked for the Army as a contractor and was supposed to be in the Pentagon that day. This wasn't anything new for him since he worked in Crystal City, which sits just across from the Pentagon. He did his normal thing, made us breakfast, got us ready for school, got dressed in his suit, and dropped us off. A few hours later, and it seemed as though the whole world had changed. I had caught a glimpse of the news that was playing in another classroom and had heard rumors of a bomb going off at the Pentagon. They made an announcement that school was closing early and all the classes were to convene in the lunchroom. A lot of us had parents who worked there, so the anxiety in the lunchroom as we waited for our parents to pick us up was palpable. They called my name, and I walked out to the pickup line to see my dad, dressed in his weekend clothes, waiting for me in our family van. The ride home was quiet, as I couldn't think of anything to say, and my dad's face was set in a stoic expression the whole time, which was incredibly unusual for him. When we got home, it was only as he was putting the keys into our front door that I got the courage to ask why he was there to pick me up and why wasn't he dressed in his suit. He paused for a second, then turned to me and said, "I was on my way to work when someone told me not to go in. I don't know who, but it was very clear insistent that I go home, so I did." I stayed silent as we walked inside, up to our living room, and he turned on the TV. We watched the news coverage together in silence for, honestly, I don't remember how long. He finally left to go pick up my siblings from their school, and just before he left, I finally got the courage to ask about my mom, who worked at the Pentagon. He told me he hadn't heard anything from her yet because the phone lines were busy, but that he was sure she was going to be okay. I stayed glued to the TV all day, and when my dad came back with my sisters, he joined me. Much later that evening, we went to pick up my mom. She was okay, but after initially being evacuated from the Pentagon, she had gone back with a few others to help in any way they could. The meetings my dad was supposed to be at, the ones he missed because an audible voice told him to go home, were hit by the plane that struck the Pentagon. Had it not been for that voice, I would have lost my dad, my rock, and the reason why I am still here today. I am forever grateful for the voice that told my dad not to go into work that day.
When my son was 3, he started having dreams and visions of people coming out of holes and dancing in his room. He said they were trying to tell him something. He also said he would wake up to see faces in the dark, and they were screaming at him. There were many nights when his screaming would wake me up, and I would run into his room. It honestly sounded like he was being attacked. One night, in his room, he was telling me about one of his experiences. I saw a streak of white light move up over his face. Another time, I ran into his room and he was up on his knees, looking around the room. I didn't say anything and just continued to watch him in the dark. This went on for about 15 minutes, and finally, he looked at me and he said one word, Manya. It was apparently his name for whatever spirit he was seeing. Another time on the baby monitor, and we heard a loud male voice say, "Stop that." We happened to know a mother and daughter psychic team and enlisted their help. They tuned in and both said they saw an evil old man spirit from the 40s who brought in other souls to make mischief. He also smoked a cigar. We often smelled cigar smoke in our hallway outside my son's bedroom. They tried cleansing the house remotely. They lived in another city. We thought all was good until one evening we were walking into our dining room to sit down when my son went flying forward into the table. He started crying and said that someone pushed him from behind. We kept our son in our room that night, and my wife and I both heard what sounded like an old man making gagging noises from my other son's room. He was 11 months old. Our friends put together a whole team and they came and cleansed the house. It was quite a process, and our neighbors probably thought we were real weirdos, but they got the job done. We haven't had any issues in 10 years. It was really scary.
This probably doesn't fall under extremely distressing, but I'll put my story down. The earliest memory I have is of an experience with an apparition. Based on what I know, I was no more than 3 years old when I saw it. Parents didn't believe me, always had some explanation for me. We moved houses and tiny things would happen here and there, but once again, my parents always chalked it up to an overactive imagination. There was a full-body apparition that both my brother and I saw as it walked past a doorway while we were home alone. Fast forward to getting married and moving into an old apartment, things start to heat up a little bit. Bins would get flipped over and the contents dumped on the floor. Things would slide off of the back of our vanity, about 18 inches deep, and fly 3 feet to hit the footboard of our bed, not gently. More activity than I had experienced before, but still not a lot. We moved into an almost brand new apartment, and while 1 or 2 things happened, things calmed down significantly. Then we moved in with my in-laws while my husband went to school. Cue the real events. The house would go through periods of high activity, particularly centered around me. My husband would hear me calling him from another room. I wouldn't be calling him. He would see me pass by the bottom of the stairs as he was coming down and would follow me all the way around the corner into the far room, only to dead end with the room empty. I came in from the chicken coop to him upset because I'd been calling him from all over the house. I'd been outside the whole time. It would make one of the dogs go absolutely feral, barking and snarling at nothing. I would have small, soft items thrown at me. I would hear clapping and walking around the house, and the dogs would go looking for what made the noise. Here's the main story. My husband was working nights, and I was home alone on the farm while the in-laws were out of state on a trip. One of the dogs goes into an episode, staring at nothing in the middle of the living room, absolutely losing it. Rabid dog. I can't get her to calm down. Usually a light touch on the back will snap her out of it, but I could not call her off this time. I finally go to my room to take a breather, and I hear her stop. Maybe 15 minutes later, she's at it again. I can't describe how terrifying it is to see her like this. Like I said, absolutely feral. I go halfway up the stairs and am talking to her through the banister, finally get her to come over to me and stop barking. She keeps looking next to me at the top of the stairs, then a huge slam on the baby gate there happens, rattling the gate and the banister. I ignore it because I've heard that's the best thing to do when something's right next to you. The dog barks, but I get her stopped again. Then right in my line of sight, I see a pen slid forcefully off the table, flying multiple feet before hitting the ground. The dog immediately runs to attack and goes into another fit looking at something next to the table. I start to lose it, immediately go back downstairs to my bedroom. I sit on my bed next to my cat napping there. He stands up and comes to me since I'm upset and crying. I hear the dog move back to barking in the living room, closer to my room. A minute later, my cat turns to look at the doorway, his back raises up, ears pinned back, and his hair stands on end, looking straight at the doorway. I ran out of the house at that point. That was the worst it ever got.
I have lots of other little stories, though. I just moved into a brand new house and, knock on wood, nothing yet. I refuse to talk about paranormal activity aloud in any home I stay in, and I think subconsciously I pushed myself to only move into a new construction for fear of stirring anything in an existing house up. With what I know about the experiences through my life compared with where I was staying, I've kind of begun to think I might be a poltergeist. A new construction home was the only place I felt safe moving into. So while my story isn't to the level of a horror movie, I'm happy to be out of old houses and apartments.
I used to work in the Winchester Mystery House. For those that don't know, it's a mansion built by the heiress to the Winchester Rifle Company. She built the mansion with confusing rooms, doors, and stairways that lead to nowhere, so she could confuse the ghosts of those killed by the Winchester rifle. There had been random ghost sightings by employees throughout the years, and it was listed as an official haunted house. I worked in the office and answered phones, which happened to be one of the 160 rooms of the mansion. One of my jobs was to inform the tour station when the last tour exited because my office was near the end of the tour and I could hear the footsteps of the tour. Well, one day around 6 p.m., as I'm closing up, I hear footsteps in the house and inform the tour station that the last tour was about to exit. They told me that the last tour left the house about an hour earlier. So my first thought was that it was my manager on patrol. When he came back into the office, I asked him if he was in the house, and he said no, he was in the gift shop. He informed me that he closed it up and absolutely no one was in the house. As he was saying that, we continued to hear footsteps in the house above us. We looked at each other with that look you give someone when you don't know what the fuck is going on. He and two other people went into the house to look for the source of the footsteps, thinking it was a guest who had gotten lost. They walked into the exact same room where I was hearing footsteps and saw that there was no one there. When they came back into the office, we just sat in our chairs until 8 p.m., listening for footsteps as they were wandering around the house. None of us really acknowledged what we were hearing because we wanted to believe it was just the house creaking. However, these sounds sounded nothing like creaking, as they were well-defined with the cadence of footsteps. I'll never quite know what it was that was above us that day. Perhaps there was a logical explanation. Let's just say I didn't sleep well for about a month after that event.